Hello there, Hayden. Can you hear me
I
okay?
can. I can. How are you?
I'm doing beautifully. It's so great to talk to you on this Monday evening. Firstly, how are you doing and how have you been since, I think, casting your mind back to 2017 when I first interviewed you in that beautiful Birmingham festival, Beyond the Tracks in a Field. I don't know if you
Oh
have any
yeah,
memories of that festival or that interview, but it's kind of crazy to look back on how much time's passed
yeah.
since then.
Was Slow Dive playing that day?
Slow Dive. I think they were. I know Editors were on the bill, and Peter Hook and the Light were also playing. I'm pretty sure it was just a one-day event, but it was
Yeah.
quite a festival.
I do. Was it a sunny blue day?
Something like that. I mean, it was Birmingham, so everything always feels a bit grey in hindsight, but I
Oh,
think it was. You
I have a big
always
soft spot for Birmingham.
you always say this, and I love this. I think was it a former girlfriend or something like that lived in Birmingham, and you were talking about the view of an apartment or something.
Yeah, yeah. My girlfriend, when I was a teenager, moved to Birmingham, so it was the first city I got to know. Um, having grown up in Kendal, I didn't really know cities, and I thought Birmingham was like like a good gateway drug as far as city goes, because it's not. I don't think it's a pretentious city.
No.
I think it's quite a kind of, it's a grounded city, but it's also very expansive
Mm,
and not very expensive.
very true.
At least when I was there. Yeah, and like all the cool things, you kind of had to dig them out. You kind of had to discover them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it. I still do.
I think you're very right. Like for me being from Birmingham, it's a city that has all the things you get from a big city, but compared to London or even I think Manchester, it feels like you can very much go at your own pace there. And there's not this relentlessness. I think there's still a friendliness.
Yeah,
Like when I walk around in the morning, you still feel like people meet your eye and say good morning. So it has a bit of the best of both worlds.
absolutely. And plus, when you hear the accent, the Brummie accent can just melt butter. I mean,
You
it's just,
like it. I'm glad you
I
like
think,
it.
oh, it's just so disarming, I think. It's
Mm,
just so, like, kind of, I don't know, I find it friendly.
I'm with you.
Um, I've also played some amazing gigs in Birmingham over the years. First gig I ever did in Birmingham, Wild Beast was supporting Vampire Weekend.
Yeah, because
Um,
you've had some ridiculous bands that you've played with. Like, obviously, Vampire Weekend, I didn't know. But off the top of my
yeah,
head, Alt J have supported you, and
hmm
so has Adele, if I'm correct.
yeah. Adele was at the Birmingham Barfly.
That's
Um,
incredible. Wow.
um, yeah, I have to say, talented. I
Absolutely,
have
yeah.
to say,
I feel like that's the only time there would be someone on the same bill as you who might vocally be on a level comparable. Is
oh, you're
Adele?
very kind. I mean, I remember, yeah, being quite taken aback and making a point of saying, hell, like that was quite something.
Yeah.
And she was, very humble and very lovely. Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, I can't say that I stood there and thought this work is going to sell more than Thriller.
Yeah.
But hey, like all power to her, incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the thing about music. I guess you never know. Before I dive into this as well, guys, in chat, you should be able to comment. If you have any questions for Hayden, whatever they are, I will do my best to put them to him as he is drinking a nice brew.
Well, and I've also just noticed it's a full moon tonight, and I feel like I look like I've got a full moon about to drop on my head.
Oh, it's
Um,
just your lampshade, isn't it?
yeah, it is. But good effect. We should, if we were promoting full moon, moon dust for my diamond, it would have been very apt.
It would be so perfect. We have a question already from Rihivi, all the way in Finland. In fact, before I ask you the question, have you ever performed in Finland? I feel like you might have gone that way with Wild Beasts.
I supported Jon Hopkins in a show in Helsinki a couple of years back.
It's just, I love how casual it is. It's like Adele, Alt J, Jon Hopkins, like all these different people. That must have been a great show with John.
I was wonderful. I
And
was incredible. Yeah.
it makes me really happy that he's a continual supporter of you because his remix of, I think it was Two Dancers, is a brilliant, brilliant remix.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you know this exists. A Lady Gaga remix. Wild Beast did a Lady Gaga remix.
I didn't know that. Where, is
Yeah,
that on streaming or somewhere out in the ether?
it's somewhere. It's somewhere out there. It's I should know the song. You and I, it's called. And Jon Hopkins and I did it. This was
Oh, okay.
John.
Yeah.
John very kindly showed me how to do how to do a remix.
Yeah. So what era is that? Is that Wild Beast or your solo?
It's Wild Beast. That was 2012.
Okay, so that would be present tense era or closer to Smother?
Closer to Smother, I
Oh yeah,
think.
Smother
Yeah.
was 2011. Well, there you go. That's
Yeah.
pretty amazing. I think it actually. I was going to bring it up a lot later, but it feels like a perfect segue here while we're talking about the list of your admirers and Wild Beast's admirers as well. Ellie Goulding once had your lyrics as her Twitter bio. Oh, do you want my heart between your teeth? Which is a nice nugget of info, I think.
We're between us. We're doing some major name drops right now.
Well, it's got to be done. It's got to be done, but it's just anecdotally quite, funny, isn't it?
No, you're right. Yeah, no. Ellie Goulding was on the first Jules Holland we ever did. She was performing,
Yeah.
and again, one of these where you're in the same room, and all of a sudden, the next time you look, they're kind of in the kind of palace, as it
That's a
were.
good Wild Beast name drop there.
Yeah, again, another Marty's name drop. Yeah, let's see how many like major global stars we can fit into this interview
I feel
between us.
like I'm looking at my interview notes and I think I've just blown it and exhausted them all. In fact, I've got at least one more, which
Okay,
you may
okay,
have
okay,
guessed, but I'll leave it.
okay.
I think we're good. Yeah, is there anyone else who I don't know? Like, if I was Nardwar, I'd have been able to hack your primary school report or something and find out details. Are there any other ridiculous fans of your music that we might not know?
Oh,
The
one of my
king.
one of my favourites was Ray Parlour,
Mm,
Arsenal. The Arsenal winger.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That's pretty amazing. Phil says, would be great to understand the different experiences Hayden had going from group to an individual project. So yeah, that's a great question. I know you've talked in interviews about the transition from the end of Wild Beast to becoming a solo artist and maybe the void that you felt at the end of that band. It must be fairly daunting, but then quite affirming at the start when everything comes together.
I can't say. I have to be honest. I never felt daunted.
Okay.
I think a band is an incredibly intense and particular experience, unlike any I can kind of compare it to in my own life. Um, I assume it's kind of what a cult must be like in some respect, and that's in that. By that I mean your entire identity is subsumed within this kind of collective,
Yeah.
and all of your hours, all of your outpourings, all of your being, both mental and physical, kind of goes into this collective enterprise. I think and I'm even more fascinated by bands now that I'm not in one because they really are such a unique way of organizing human beings.
Mm.
They're not a family, but they are a family. They're not a relationship, but they are a relationship. They're not a business, but they are a business. They're kind of this. They're all the kind of messy parts of all of those arrangements put
Absolutely.
together. Yeah, and I live vicariously now through my friends in bands. I mean, I guess the reason why I wasn't daunted is because I feel like we lived it so fully, and
Mm.
it was such a complete enterprise. We left out of the same door we came in on, and
Yeah.
I think in the era of people say the bands are dead and there aren't many bands. That's not true. Just look a bit harder. There are tons of incredible bands,
Yeah.
and it's not that the existence of bands has changed. It's just the existence of the mechanism with which the music industry has changed so greatly that actually bands are kind of getting, I think, kind of shouted out by the algorithm. So
Yeah.
I think that's nonsense. And I also think, and I always have believed that bands are an ephemeral thing. They're not supposed to be forever. They're not supposed to be. And without wanting to break anyone's heart, there is a juncture where your favorite band do become more of a business enterprise than they do a kind of creative exercise.
Yeah.
And navigating that is a difficult thing to do. And we decided to take that kind of do you choose door A or choose door B? And we chose door B.
Yeah.
But all of my favorite bands did. So
it's
I think it's inevitable. I find it really interesting that because I feel like I'm talking about husbands here when I talk about a band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I heard recently that people said that it shouldn't a failed marriage should not be deemed as a failed marriage. You know, it shouldn't be deemed as failed. You know,
Yeah.
if you bear in mind that like 50% of marriages end in divorce, that tells you that they're not failing; they're just running their course, and that the huge love, achievements, and life lived fully within those arrangements have not failed. They have just kind of done what they're meant to do, and I think an arrangement of people working in a very pure-hearted and true way can only ever be that.
Yeah, it's beautifully put. It's beautifully put. And I was actually lucky enough to be at one of your final gigs with Wild Beast. It was the Manchester one. I went to with my friend Emily. A big shout out to her. And yeah, we were Wild Beast fans, I think, since about year 11 or 12, year 11 or sixth form at school. So it would be like kind of since Smother, just after Two Dancers era. And yeah, it was going out, as you say, the same door you came in on, and it felt more celebratory than like funereal. I felt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the existence of a song is a minor miracle. You know, never mind a collection of songs like that. There was so much to be celebrated, and songs last longer than you do. So you know, there's nothing funereal about it. It will outlive me.
Absolutely. It's funny what you say about bands though, and the kind of dynamic in them. I've been lucky enough to go on tour with a few bands now, like smaller bands, vlogging with them as they go, and the relationship between the members, I think especially boys in bands, there is something there about masculinity. You tour, you go on the road, there's kind of this intense love between each other, like the euphoria walking off stage, but also I've witnessed like one or two fights and then scraps, and it's like you're either punching or kissing each other. I've experienced at times. I don't know if that holds true for you at all.
It's interesting because I see how bands exist, and music always exists through any art, exists through the kind of paradigm of gender that it is made in. So our kind of early noughties exists, you know, when we became men in the kind of 2005-6, that was a certain version of masculinity that I feel now has moved on again.
Oh yeah.
Not as a strict rule, but I do see and hope that like young guys are able to be a bit more loving and open-hearted with one another. I think we got some of the way there, but probably not far enough. You know, and it is about love. It's an exchange of love and exchanges of love between men. You know, in both kind of sexual and non-sexual ways. You know, I'm talking about kind of just interpersonal love, however that kind of represents itself, is always it's always kind of prone to the time that it exists in, and I don't know, it's a beautiful thing. And you know,
absolutely. And I always feel it's almost like the next generation add a bit more to the puzzle we're trying to build. It's like you learn from the previous and you kind of add things, but then it's always a cycle. Like the next generation learns from the last, and eventually you'd hope there's some point of completion where you can say like, yeah, we've kind of figured this out now. We're contributing a lot of positivity, and the more negative aspects are maybe phased out.
I think I heard an interview with the singer of Fontaines, DC,
Grian Chatton, yes.
And he said, we're just very aware of each other's hearts.
Yeah.
You know, we hold space for each other's hearts. And I heard that, and I was just kind of so happy for them. And so I was kind of, that really hit home that, okay, that's the kind of language you need to withstand and tolerate the very strange, obscure, and wildly kind of challenging things that go on in your career as a collective. So if that's the kind of language of the new generation, then kind of bring it on. You know, it's about time. We have a question from Finland?
Oh yeah, I was just realising I mentioned Finland, but I completely forgot to ask you the question, which I was going to get onto. A big shout out to Fontaines DC, by the way. I think they're my favourite band last year, and Romance is such a brilliant album. It was my #1 album of the year. Just a brilliant album. Rivi's question was, Hayden, do you like mangoes?
that actually carries on really nice from the man conversation.
Man to mangoes.
Yeah. I love mangoes. I think they are actually like one of the more exquisite fruits. If anyone has a good hookup to get some decent mangoes in this country, then I'm all ears. As you may or may not know, I live in Walthamstow on and off. I've done for about 10 years now.
Yeah.
There is a guy on the market here who sells a box of mangoes for £5, and it's like I give them as gifts because they come wrapped in like yellow tissue paper, and they're just like, it's such a joyous gift to give someone. And they're like kind of they're golden inside. They're like butter.
Wow.
Yeah, love mangoes.
Yeah, there you go.
And I also think the cool thing about mangoes is to cut them. When you cut them like a hedgehog and invert them.
Like a hedgehog. Oh yeah, you score them and then you push them. I was concerned if you were saying you actually cut hedgehogs and comparing the way that you cut a hedgehog, but no, I see what you mean now.
Yeah. My preferable way of keeping mangoes is to collect hedgehogs and just kind of stick the fruit on the spine.
Yeah. Consume it that way. Save it for later.
They ripen better. Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Rihavi says new favorite musician. So that you've won a fan in Finland through your love of mangoes.
Fabulous.
If there's any tour plans. But moving on to, I guess, part of the big reason you're here, the album Ness, which I've said I think it's such a brilliant, an incredible album. And in a way, I think the first album that you've done, maybe even with Wild Beast, that feels like a complete conceptual EP that needs to be listened to in its wholeness to appreciate. It's obviously an adaptation of Robert McFarlane's Ness. So I guess talk to me about this album and the way that you happened upon this book and the process through which the idea to adapt it into an album came out.
Thanks for the question. It was a really chance event, and I don't think it could have happened unless it was. I think it may have been too contrived or too kind of workshopped.
Yeah.
If we had have kind of come at it from a more organized angle, it was totally just happenstance. I wrote Rob an email because I loved his work. It kind of really inspired me. I was living back up in the lakes, and I was kind of feeling pretty sorry for myself, dislocated from the city and kind of centers of culture, and Rob's language allowed me to feel closer to something rather than further away. He allowed me to feel kind of a reconnection with the natural world I was surrounded by. Yeah. And and I hadn't heard of Orford Ness, which is the kind of the subject matter of Ness. And he gave me this book, and it was obviously illustrated by Stanley Donwood, the legendary Stanley Donwood.
That was the other celebrity I was going to mention. I think he's a celebrity, Stanley.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think he's a pretty heavyweight.
He designed the cover to Kid A, which is now probably one of the most iconic covers of the 21st century. So
yeah, it's the cover. The cover is a masterpiece. I mean, the work is a masterpiece, but the cover is equally so.
Yeah.
So we just I riffed some music to his reading of it live, and we kind of had a eureka moment where we thought this kind of spooky, kind of English soul kind of was a good framework for this work, which is kind of broadly about a rewilded National Trust site off of the Suffolk coast, where the Ministry of Defence used to develop weapons, atomic weaponry, and where they perfected death, where they kind of could develop ways of greater and greater ways of exterminating people. And so it has a very haunted, dark past, but it is a redemption story.
Yeah.
It's now a rewilded site with really unique, beautiful flora and fauna.
Yeah.
And it's a very human story. I took to it as a story that I could resonate with and empathize with. Ness did bad things. Bad things happened to Ness. Mistakes were made, but it's now a place of protection of the vulnerable. Very, very rare species are now protected there, and things were made better. And I think Ness is a story that is made of the fact that the decommissioned nuclear weapon they have there is decommissioned, and that the wilded habitat they have there is wilded.
Yeah.
Both those things are very unique and therefore important to kind of celebrate.
So they literally have a nuclear bomb still there that's been deactivated? Because I didn't know that, if so.
Yeah, they have. It's called the WE-177A, which is referenced in the album, and yeah, it's a missile the size of a table, and it was in the room when we launched the album at Orford Ness, so people were sitting amongst this weapon.
Wow.
And yeah, it really was the best stage prop I've ever had. It really kind of set the room on fire, if I dare say that.
Not literally, thankfully.
It would have been a major fire if so.
Oh, God,
no, it really kind of. Sometimes you feel good about it being there, and sometimes you feel absolutely terrified about it being there. I think
you would be terrified.
Yeah, the thing that I really got from it, engaged from it, was that this thing, which is the size of a table, like I said, was actually 15 times more powerful than the bomb that fell on Nagasaki, which was itself more powerful than the bomb that fell on Hiroshima. And you realize that we have really corrupted nature, that there's been some progress to a point of break, that we should be able to manipulate nature to destroy, exterminate a vast city with this relatively small object is just blows open your sense of scale and understanding.
I think I partially resent that in modern political discourse, we've maybe reached a point where people don't actually understand, they can't put in tangible terms what a nuclear bomb is. And sometimes I've caught myself being at a football stadium with tens of thousands of people, and you look around and it's sort of like, picture every one of those people instantly dying, and then like everyone maybe you've ever met in that instant. And then the contrast is, I remember this point on BBC Question Time where Jeremy Corbyn was lambasted for not saying that he would press the nuclear button unequivocally, and there's such a kind of callousness about that. Like, well, of course, why wouldn't you fire a nuke? Why wouldn't you instantly kill 100,000 people? And I don't know why we see that as a weakness, that you would choose to not do that.
Well, yeah, I think Jeremy Corbyn is an interesting one because he legendarily collapsed Labour back up in Cumbria, where I'm from, because that is where Sellafield is. It's where the Trident nuclear subs are being built. And by saying that, he actually crashed 100 years worth of Labour.
Wow.
Because the local community walked away saying, well, the nuclear industry is our bread and butter. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? I mean, when we started making Ness, or where I started making the music for it, Russia were 9 months over the border into Ukraine, and we kind of thought, this is looking disturbing.
Yeah.
And ever since, the kind of background to this work has been the kind of escalation of horrors and of unimaginable kind of death and you know, the rest. So in a way, I wish the story of the album were about rewilding, which is what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But inevitably and ultimately, the album is an anti-war record, and I didn't want to kind of sell the record on that point, because I think to come out with such a kind of binary line would kind of diminish the kind of power of the record. I think it's kind of a soft power, and music kind of can speak to your inner senses rather than your kind of cranial senses, which we're so kind of inundated with every day.
It's fascinating to glean that, because I didn't fully appreciate it on first listen or second listen or onwards, and now I'll listen to it again with sort of new eyes and new ears. And one of the questions I was going to ask you, because you have motifs and lines that repeat across the record, is what is the song of the bomb? Because that's a line that you repeat across the record. And I guess I now have a bit more context to that, but I'm sure you can kind of elaborate on the song of the bomb.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, the song of the bomb is kind of like the recurring hymn of these collection of engineers and physicists who are putting together the weapon. And really, it's a belief system, because you are creating a god. You know, you are building a lightning bolt with which you get to determine the fate of humanity. I mean, so belief systems and religion are all bound up in this, in many ways. And as with any messianic kind of attitude, there's an element of fetish about it too. Like it decides what is and what isn't kind of okay. And if you think about religion, how it kind of also always has a godhead, and in this sense we have a warhead. And I tell you what, when you see the bomb, also you realize what a stupid kind of phallic totem it is.
Yeah, I can.
If they were to dig it, if they dig it up in 1,000 years' time, they might think it was some kind of like fertility amulet. And you realize this over-exaggeration of aggression and masculinity in its own most absurd form. You know. So the Song of the Bomb is this kind of refrain that speaks of this coming together of this weapon and this kind of frenzy that demands that it gets fired.
Yeah. Have you watched Oppenheimer? And what did you make of the whole kind of furor and the movement around that? Because I had mixed feelings, and I feel part of it was kind of remembrance, but at least for me it felt at times a bit celebratory. So I have conflicting views. I don't know if you've seen it and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I thought the soundtrack was brilliant. It kind of sounded like science, which I liked. I found it more interesting that it was back in our consciousness, that this story about the weapon was back in kind of everyday thought. That to me was more interesting than the film itself. And now, we seem to be kind of inundated with different documentaries and insights retelling this story as if like we are now very aware of the red button in Putin's room, in
Trump's room.
soon to be Trump's room, and you don't want those buttons in those rooms, really, do you?
Yeah, absolutely. Another line in the album that recurs a lot is, or more of a reference than a line, but drift. You say a lot about drift. So what is drift in this context? Is it the sound that a stream makes? You say in this beautiful spoken word segment that it's the most beautiful sound. I don't know if I've heard it, but maybe I have, and I haven't got a name for it.
Yeah, well, obviously Rob McFarlane wrote the words to Drift, and what I've heard him describe it is the ocean is a hyper object.
Yeah.
So the ocean was already the greatest object in the world in terms of mass, volume, scale.
Yeah.
As a collective, all waters are one, ultimately. So it's just kind of this huge hyper object. What we have done in modernity is exponentially increase the scale and size of that hyper object with kind of the outpourings of our consumerist society, plastics, waste, what have you. So what we are now living amongst is this object which is now consuming us. What we have consumed and discarded is now coming back to consume us. And there is some kind of something that you cannot even kind of comprehend about the vastness of that. And that song, Drift, or It, on the album is probably the most absurd I've ever done. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it's supposed to be, to the point of being funny. But I thought we'd be doing a disservice to kind of whittle it down or diminish that. Like, it's just the oceanic drift is beyond comprehension.
It's amazing. But it's funny hearing you say it, because I think back to Limbo Panto actually, and some of the lyrics on the debut Wild Beast record, and like, please sir, take these chips with cheese as an offering of peace, or cheerio chaps, cheerio goodbye. I think you've always had that sense of like whimsy and farce, almost like ludicrosity, if that's a word.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I love that. I mean, if any album, I think Ness's twin in a way is Limbo Panto for a number of reasons. Maybe because it's Ness is the first record I have produced and engineered, and I think I had that same palpable sense of adventure of first timeness.
Yeah.
That kind of like I was a virgin producer, if I can put it like that.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of being a virgin musician, metaphorically, not. No, yeah, I know I grew up in Kendal, but we do have some pleasures.
Of course.
But it had that kind of. I have so much to say, and I have to say it all in one go, all in one breath.
Yeah.
Yes, I was channeling Limbo Panto when making a lot of Ness, I think, and bringing in kind of. I think in many ways also because remember that first Wild Beast record came out in 2008. We recorded it in 2007, at a time when I think it was perhaps more scope for independent labels to really throw some decent funds at a strange band like Limbo Panto is a very, very odd...
like as an introduction, it's crazy to me, but I'm so happy that Domino have been so great and continue to support you now. Actually,
absolutely,
great label.
absolutely. Yeah, here's to that. Well, I think if you think about it, we recorded Limbo Panto in this beautiful kind of Swedish studio with a kind of top producer, Tori Hansen, and by osmosis, you tend to learn those tricks where those kind of processes and lo and behold, they were kind of held within me. So I was remembering as we were going those days, I guess.
Yeah,
those techniques.
Now, one of the big things about this record that we've already touched on is that you worked with Stanley Donwood from it, and he has the link to Radiohead through his artwork. When I listen to V, which is my favourite track on the album, the one that I led into this interview with, I do get a bit of that Kid A energy, maybe in the synth. Was that in your head at the time with V?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, V was a total accident, as this all was. I mean, I went into the studio without really an intention that day, and I started I was in my dear friend Hinako Omori's studio. She was giving me some time there very kindly, and she has a huge plethora of incredible synths. She does play with Ed O'Brien, maybe that's a link there, but
okay.
Yeah, it was just a kind of coming together of this collection of synths, ridiculous library of synths, and it just kind of happened. The synth in V is actually a re-sculpting of the synth in Hotel November Tango on Moondust. That's a kind of little Easter egg.
Well, there you go. That's cool to hear. In terms of Stanley Donwood artworks, do you have a personal favourite? I think I've got one which I can very conveniently pull out straight away. This is Atoms for Peace. It's one of Radiohead's side projects and a mock, and I've always thought this is a beautiful artwork.
Okay.
And it's funnily, I think that actual concept tells the story of a civilization that exists and then collapses, maybe a bit like the rewilding of Ness after the nuclear disaster. Yeah, any Stanley Donwood art that stands out to you?
Is that so? I didn't know a mock was a concept record about that arc. Is that what it's?
Well, I think at least there is a book by. There was a book by Stanley Donwood, which I've forgotten the name of, which I think it kind of develops, and it came out recently, and that at least is the story. I might be conflating there, but I've always thought a mock has that kind of. I mean, it's called Atoms for Peace, so it's always had that kind of nuclear.
Yes, of course. They also have Flea in the band.
Yeah.
Which is a nuclear.
Yeah, it's a cool supergroup.
Stanley's work. Oh, I mean, obviously, I'm deeply, deeply attached to the Ness work. His work really, his illustrations for Ness were fundamental to the way the record sounds. I think as soon as I saw these kind of gothic etchings of this arid, desperate landscape that he depicts, I kind of knew how I wanted it to sound. I knew I wanted that kind of darkness to it. And also the way Stanley Donwood describes the way he composed those illustrations, they're always 2/3 land, 1/3 sky.
Yeah.
So if you listen to, say, a song like As on Ness, you'll notice that it's very much 2/3 one thing, 1/3 another. Arrangements were kind of made to reflect that. Yeah. Yeah, and he was the one who made me think of this as desert music, as somehow akin to the music of the desert. I mean,
Yeah,
um, and then obviously we go towards Morricone, the kind of quintessential desert music
of
maker with his
course,
cowboy
Marilyn.
music, and you know the story of the cowboys and how the gun beat back the bow and destroyed the kind of habitats and landscapes there was very much reminiscent of what happened on Ness, where very, very big guns were built
Yeah,
and beat back the wild.
yeah,
Um, so there was an echo there, which I felt, was a kindred kind of relationship sonically. And the clarinet on Ness is very kind of
yeah,
very of the ocarina line, which
yeah.
is Morricone.
I think
But yeah,
I think it's quite a Narnia sound to me. It reminds me of the Chronicles of Narnia, almost the TV adaptation that I grew up watching, and then
oh,
balances with the
ah,
electronics that come in.
I'll give that a re-listen. Thanks for that
But there
tip.
you go, my pleasure. You might know it then, the BBC ones.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. It is a kind of Narnia. When you go across to Ness,
Mm.
when you get the boat across this river, or and you're in this other place, there is a sense of Narnia about it. The other side. Um, yeah, no, but I could talk about Stanley's work. I got to go to Ness with Stanley,
Oh,
uh,
that would be
and
an
that was
amazing
it was
experience.
it was awesome. It was just awesome. To see it through his eyes was just incredible, and yeah, he spent some time there to make the work, as he told me. I think he kind of really inhabited the landscape for a while, and it's a very spooky place, as you'd imagine. I mean,
Yeah,
um, the last kind of guardian of the place before National Trust took it over, actually did go crazy, and um, when we were doing the Nest Speak shows on Orford Ness, a group of people were brave enough to stay in the barracks, and they all came away. This is in September. They all came away with really, really scary stories.
oh wow, yeah,
And they were all really pragmatic, grounded people, and I was really disturbed by what I was hearing.
yeah.
And Rob McFarlane himself stayed down there overnight on his own, which I think tells you something about.
That would be a lot. By the way, we have currently 2 minutes left on the Zoom. Do you have a bit more time if we remake it, or do you have to shoot off?
I can do another 10.
Awesome, that's great. I'll remake this meeting then. I think it should work if I just end it and then restart it as it was. So yeah, I'll see you very shortly, Hayden. This'll work, right, guys? I'll just click the Zoom interview again. They never thought I would just close the same meeting and reopen it again. Seems all good. I haven't got a time limit. I'll just message Hayden. I hope you guys are enjoying the interview, though. This is obviously amazing for me. There Hayden is. If you have any questions for him, as I say, just put them in chat. And yeah, I'll ask them to him. There you go. Easy as that. Welcome back, Hayden.
Great, thank you.
Brilliant. It's nice to know because there's a few more things, and it's always good to not feel like you have to rush them. In terms of the album tracks and the titles, obviously parts of it come from Robert, but I find the name of the track, WTF is that, or what the fuck is that, because we can swear, really funny. Is that his name or your name? And I don't know, what's the title mean?
Yeah, we took that from the book, and I just took it out of a sentence and isolated it. And I guess it means what the fuck is that? It means kind of I see Ness as a monster. It's a monstrous being. It's almost like a kind of T-Rex or a Loch Ness monster. There's definitely something.
I was going to say the Ness part,
yeah.
Loch Ness monster.
Yeah, it's definitely Nessy. There's something formidable and terrifying about it as a cohesive whole. And if you think about, I do think about Ness as one organism, as one being, as an it. And what the fuck is that was supposed to kind of make you feel like something emerging out of the distance. When you arrive at this place, you see the laboratories of death in the distance, there are these like Parthenon type structures, and you really get a sense of some very paranoid and dangerous thing going on.
Yeah.
So it's that looming sense of threat that emerges, and that song came about in the first 15 minutes of us, Jack and I, who arranged the record, Jack McNeil. Within 15 minutes, that kind of song was up and running.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another question I wanted to ask you is actually, do you have other records that you're a big fan of that are kind of about places in the same way that Ness is? Because funnily enough for me, the record really reminded me of a band, there's a chance, called the Magnetic North.
Yeah, I love the Magnetic North too.
So you played Green Man Festival the same year as them, actually, when I was there. And they have, as you may well know, the Orkney concept record, the Magnetic North, and then one about Skelmersdale. And I feel like spiritually it does a similar thing to Ness. So it's cool to see you do that record, because I remember when I was going to Green Man, I was listening through playlists to find bands playing. I knew you guys were performing, and yeah, I discovered the Magnetic North, and I just really loved a lot of them.
Yeah, they were great. And I mean, Hannah Peel, who was in the band, is, yeah, I mean, she's genius. Her work is incredible. Probably did have some, the record she made, Fur Wave, probably did have some impact on this record, I think. Yeah. Erland too, shout out to Erland. Yeah, he was an inspiration for sure. Yeah, I think, I think people underestimate how much records are already about places. Like for me, the Smiths is all about Manchester.
Oh, very true.
Or, and Mogwai is like achingly Glasgow. Of course it is.
Every time I come into Glasgow, I have to listen to Mogwai, and particularly the song that I can't remember its name now, but it has the lyric, "What would you do if you saw spaceships over Glasgow?" And as I come into Take Me Somewhere Nice, that's the song. And as I come into Glasgow, I listen to that. I agree with you. It feels like I only listen to them. I play them in a very variety of places, but mostly when I'm going to Glasgow to visit a friend as I'm coming in.
And I think Glasgow, say as an example, it's made up both of its people, who are absolutely like a formidable force, but also it's kind of its heaviness, its heavy skies. It's kind of like, it's like braving it out against this kind of, among the kind of Scottish, beneath the Highlands, as it were. It's kind of toughing it out, and it gives back. Glasgow gives back into the music, and I found like Ness, Orford Ness, the place, gave back into the music. That once you take a life force into yourself, it kind of propels you forward. And I have to say, the thing about the album Ness is that it's bigger than us. It's bigger than Rob. It's bigger than me.
Yeah. The
story of it, the place, it's all more than we are. And I think when you're taking a story outside of yourself, it's hugely kind of gives you a huge amount of fuel. I mean, we're so used to songs being first person singular, my experience, my pain, the way I see the world. And for the first time, I think I say I in the record like once, maybe twice, and it's not to do with me either, the I. So that was just hugely galvanizing. And once you take on that force, that life force, you kind of, it's self-fulfilling. You don't have to kind of keep kind of pulling your own story up the hill with the cross over your shoulder. It's like and frankly, like, we have to kind of examine now, what are the mythologies, what are the kind of things we are telling ourselves about our lives that we're perpetuating in our songs. If the Song of the Bomb is a hymn of destruction, then what are the other hymns of destruction in this day and age? And perhaps part of that is our kind of obsession with our own story. And if you think about kind of more pre-modern songs, it was always about another kind of an ode to the greatness of God or
Yeah.
community or nature. But there was a turning point where all of a sudden we became our own God and it was all about us.
Yeah.
And in an era where the music industry is kind of dominated by tech now, X managed by a nutter, Facebook, Instagram managed by a total nutter,
Yeah.
TikTok overseen by a huge conglomerate of nutters, and Spotify,
Oh yeah.
crazy man,
I'm
crazy guy.
sure you've
And
made so much money from Spotify. Very generous
so
with their payments.
right, so we have it's kind of checkmate for musicians in a way. It's like, well, this you're drawing out this thing from the goodness of your being. You're kind of summoning up this force, and you're kind of releasing it into this kind of web of of danger, really. And it's going into this web where there's a few kind of nasty looking spiders.
Oh yeah.
So it's an interesting interrogation on all of that, and I think Ness exists because I thought, fuck you, I'm going to make exactly the thing I want to make, and if that happens to be an adaptation of an epic poem about an ex-Ministry of Defence weapons development site off of the coast of Suffolk, then fuck it, so be it.
Exactly.
And it kind of becomes a responsibility to make those records in the face of that, when the algorithm might demand something more palatable. I kind of feel it's all the more kind of tantalizing to just make the thing that's so absurd to make. And
Yeah.
in the great era of a kind of AI threat in the creative world,
Oh yeah.
I don't really see AI making Ness anytime soon.
Oh no, I don't think it could comprehend. I don't think it could
Right.
comprehend Ness.
Right.
But it's nice to see an album like Ness, and I feel like it's been received and written about and talked about to an extent that it deserves. And I think you're so right about the kind of the depersonalization being liberating, because I've tried to write lyrics myself, and I think I often read them back and I feel like I'm so self-centered, I'm so like whiny, why doesn't this feel right? But then I listened to like Foal's debut record where Yannis, I remember hearing an interview with him where he said we just wanted to avoid anything that was just first person, really autobiographical. And then Red Sox Pugy has lyrics like terminals and wasp nests in our head, and it's all like vessels blowing up, and it just feels so fresh, and I kind of love that, and I really want to try and get into that frame where you can kind of put the I aside in your music.
Yeah, I mean, he studied English, didn't he, Yannis? So I guess that's a good. Yeah, it was a good pivot. Again, name drop. We supported Foals on that tour, that first album tour.
Great tour.
They were mega. I mean, they were mega in that era. They still are, but that was extraordinary.
I mean, Two Steps Twice, I stand by. I think is one of probably the best live song ever written, and they need a Glastonbury headline spot, I think, just to kind of like when Muse had it in 2004, to kind of hit above their own weight to show that they can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope those platform. I think Glastonbury is best when it kind of dares its hand in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think Yannis still follows you, and I don't know if there's a leak.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Your stuff. I think it's really cool. It's got some brilliant minds in there too in that work.
Absolutely, like it's very danceable, and I think they're working on new music this year, so it should be a good one.
Cool.
The big headline, I guess, for 2025 with Hayden Thorpe and your music is that you are on tour, and very importantly, for anyone who wants to see Hayden in Birmingham, 2nd of February, Birmingham Town Hall, I will be there. And my uncle, who I think you know, is a very big fan of you. He's bought me. Yeah.
I love him. I love him to bits. He's come to a few of the kind of. He came to a couple of the bookshop tour shows, which really great. Appreciate it a lot. Appreciate him. He's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a matinee show too. That Birmingham Town Hall show.
Oh, fantastic. So.
What date is it again?
The 2nd of February. I've got written down.
Yeah.
At least I hope that's right. But yeah, what can we expect from the tour? Because I imagine, having just done these bookshop shows, the tour will be different. It will be a bit more plugged in, a bit more full, and a venue like Birmingham Town Hall, there's this huge grandiose organ. It's going to be quite a spectacle, I imagine, as well.
Wow, Oh yeah, I didn't think about the organ. Yeah, it's Ness in full, um, and it's with the ensemble, Propeller Ensemble. So I think I'm more excited about this show than I have been about a show for a long, long, long time. It's really powerful. It's really moving. I think I play with a orchestral percussionist and Jack on clarinet, and we have a choral section too. And it just all the sounds are emanating out of our hands and out of our lungs, and there's no trickery, and it just really is quite magical. And yeah, the shows we played launching the record were kind of the most, probably the most emotional I've ever played. I mean, people were weeping. So yeah, it's a really special moment in time. I feel very lucky to kind of be in such a kind of sonic Narnia.
Sonic Narnia. Yeah, we'll bring the Narnia motif back up. So I feel like there's a lot of international people here. Sadly, Rihavi, no finish dates yet, but we've got the Kensal Hometown show on 25th, Glasgow 26th, Liverpool, York, Gateshead, Cardiff, Bristol, Birmingham, Norwich, Brighton, Cambridge and London with Robert McFarlane. So will he be doing readings or sort of speaking on stage with you at those dates in Cambridge and London?
Yeah, Rob reads with us. It's kind of those shows are kind of director's cut Ness. They're kind of they're the kind of full package. He expands on the story.
Absolutely. And then after London and Belfast, in fact, after Cambridge and London on the 6th and 7th of February, a 3-month gap, and we have Ireland dates in Belfast and Dublin on the 7th and 8th of May, followed by Manchester. So that's a proper UK and Ireland tour. And I'm glad Birmingham's on it because we get missed off a lot.
I know, no, I think it's very easy to kind of start to kind of knock off towns, but I think it's more, we all know that it's touring has become, more challenging, but all the more reason to kind of get to these places and get in front of people. And I'm going to Europe too in April.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Any festivals at the moment?
No, working on it. There will be festivals. Yeah, working on that. Not quite able to say at this point, but
under wraps.
Yeah. No, it's a really, like I say, this project is bigger than me, and it feels really fulfilling and easier to promote in a strange way. I've always kind of found a little bit of a dissonance in promoting my own story.
Yeah.
Not to kind of disregard the importance of a kind of personal experience, because obviously the sharing of that is hugely beneficial both to creator and receiver. But on this occasion, I've just kind of enjoyed being swept away in the upwinds of the project.
Absolutely. Another question from Rihavi in chat: do you like psychedelic rock like Tame Impala, which I know he's a massive fan of? You probably play with them. You'd be like, oh, Kevin Parker was at a Wild Beast show.
Yeah, no, I'm really, kind of amazed by his capacity to create. It's kind of really something to behold. And obviously, and it being from Perth, my mum being Australian, I always kind of have a soft spot for Aussie rock and anything that kind of emanates out from that space, because it's quite remarkable. In Perth is the most isolated city in the Southern Hemisphere, so to kind of bear fruit out of there is quite something.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy that Perth seems to be such a fertile ground for that specific genre, like Pond being from there as well. There's something, and it's amazing. I never knew your mum was Australian, so there's a kind of a spiritual link or a family link there.
Yeah, definitely. And Nick Cave and all, he's a hero of mine. A lot of Aussie music kind of has influenced me over the years.
Yeah. There you go. Rihavi says he likes mangoes and knows Tame Impala. Best person Tim has ever interviewed. Wow, that's a compliment. I will actually say, and it's funny because I was trying to sort of worm a way to let them in, but I think the only interview I've done on here that I can probably compare to this is there's a band called The Antlers.
I love it.
Yeah, so I spoke to Peter Silberman, and I'd say that their music, The Antlers, and especially that album Hospice, is probably up there for me with Wild Beasts in like my top favorite and most influential artist of all time. I have a feeling I actually mentioned you to Peter and he knew you. I don't know if you have any history. You're similar generation.
Filled with Peter. That you're right. Hospice is a masterpiece. Putting the dog to sleep.
Oh, that off vocally, the both of you again. I think I put you in a bracket. Incredible falsetto and so many other performances.
Peter's voice is incredible. Yeah.
I have a little tantrum sometimes because you kind of see, I don't know if you see, but you see these like lists of like the greatest albums of all time that everyone has to listen to. And I always see Neutral Milk Hotel in the airplane over the sea there. And I like that album, but I think as a work of lo-fi, The Antlers Hospice is the kind of the magnum opus, like the pinnacle. But I said that to Peter and he rolled up his sleeve and he had a Neutral Milk Hotel tattoo. So he probably doesn't agree with me. Yeah, he does. But I just said to him, I like Hospice more. I think an airplane over the sea loses me a little bit in places.
I'm with you. I think it is a masterpiece in its own right. That record.
Yeah, it really is. It's been so great having you here. I think one of the questions that I do have to ask that you probably have been asked a few times is Wild Beasts. We're now, I think, 9 years since your last album, Boy King, came out. Is there anything potentially in the works there that might resemble some kind of reunion soon, or is it very much just in the ether at the moment?
How do I put this? Solid no.
Solid no. Okay.
No. I know it's a kind of, there's been a flutter of reformations lately, obviously, different forms, and I've been really happy for them too. I mean, other than the cynical bullshit, which was a rather large 90s rock band we all know, which the worst aspect of the modern world I can think of, like just to rip your fans off so blatantly and then blame it on management is just cynical in the extreme, and Trumpian in behaviour, really. There's it's terminal capitalism when you kind of use kind of 90s nostalgia to kind of that kind of evil, I would say, because it was a time. I learned that whole canon, Oasis, and I still love those songs, but it should have been beautiful. That's what I'm saying. It should have been beautiful. It needn't have been ugly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you have the song In My Name, and you say a lot about Don't Fly My Flag in that name, and I always felt that was a really interesting song that I think you said addressed some things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think. Yeah, I think 9 years is 9 years is a kind of eternity in the music industry too. I mean, and obviously we're not all musicians anymore, and I love those guys, and we did a really special thing, but I feel so compelled and fulfilled by the journey I'm on, and look, life is long. Yeah. If you're lucky, but at this juncture, no.
We'll have the 2060 Wild Beast reunion, something like that.
Oh, that will be ugly. That will be sad.
See how well those songs age when you're very old.
Yeah, I mean, how my throat ages is quite a big determinant of how that tour would go.
Yeah, I mean, well, it still sounds great from what I've heard so far. So I'm looking forward to the tour dates. And yeah, it's just been so wonderful talking to you. Thank you for sparing your time and sharing it. I think I've already put the ticket link in chat. If people want to support you, what should they do? I'm guessing just go listen to Ness and maybe follow you on various platforms as well.
Yeah, have a listen to Ness. It's a good starting point. Or come to a show. That'd be a good place to start, as any.
There's some really cool. There's a Hayden Thorpe merch store I found now, so you can buy T-shirts with Stanley Donwood's art on it as well. I have a feeling a friend of mine actually, who was on stream called Grace, heard me raving about Ness, and she very impulsively ordered me the vinyl for it. So I do have the vinyl. Well, I haven't collected it all yet. I need to remind her. I was saying you didn't have to do that, but she bought me it, so I do technically have a copy, and it's got that beautiful Stanley Donwood artwork on it.
I'll sign it.
To underline the interview as an epilogue, Hayden, I'd love to play another track for you. It doesn't have to be off Ness, but it very much can be off Ness. Is there another track you would like me to play as your kind of outro exit music?
What do you think? What would you like to play?
We could go for Love Crimes. I think Love Crimes is the creep of Hayden Thorpe, maybe.
Let's do that.
Let's do Love Crimes then. This is the crowd favorite. Thank you so much for your time, and I can't wait to see you in February, Hayden.
It's so good to chat, Tim. Thanks for having me, man.
Always is. See you later. Bye bye.
See you, mate. Bye bye.
Well, there you go. That was special. This is Hayden Thorpe and Love Crimes.